world, waiting for proof before they change their inner state. But what if the secret lies in a profound reversal of this logic? What if your consciousness is the sole creator and circumstances are merely its shadow? This is the timeless lesson passed from a mysterious teacher to his most famous student. Most people believe that when they have money, then they will feel wealthy. They wait for the bank account to count a change before they give themselves permission to assume abundance. They wait for evidence before they claim prosperity. This is the fatal reversal, and this is why they remain poor. The world has taught you that circumstances create consciousness. But I taught Neville Goddard something different, something that transformed him from a broke dancer in the Great Depression to a man who understood the deepest mysteries of creation. Consciousness circumstances always, never the reverse. In 1933, Neville came to me on West 72nd Street in New York. America was in the darkest period of its history. 17 million people were unemployed, banks were failing, businesses were closing, men who had been wealthy lost everything overnight. Neville had been in this country for 11 years. He was unemployed like millions of others. He had no money, no prospects. By every worldly measure, he should have been without hope. His parents had come to New York that year and pleaded with him to return to Barbados with them. They would pay all expenses. Everything would be taken care of. But Neville declined. He said no. Yet after they sailed, something remarkable happened. As he watched their ship depart, a peculiar feeling came over him. For the first time in 11 years, he desired to go to Barbados. He came to me and told me of this strange desire, and I said to him words that must have sounded like madness. You are in Barbados. Not, you will be in Barbados if you work hard enough. Not maybe someday you'll get there. But you are in Barbados right now in consciousness. He did not understand, but I knew something he had not yet learned. I knew that his poverty was not caused by the economy or his circumstances or his lack of opportunity. His poverty was caused by poverty consciousness, and consciousness can always be changed. This is the millionaire assumption. The secret of possessing wealth in consciousness before a single dollar appears in your hand, the principle that if you truly understand it, will reshape your entire relationship with money and abundance. This is not wishful thinking. This is not positive affirmation. This is the law. And today I will teach you how to embody wealth before money arrives. The world operates from a fundamental error. It believes that having creates being, that when you have money, then you will be wealthy. This seems logical. It seems like common sense. How can you feel wealthy when your bank account is empty? How can you assume prosperity when bills are unpaid? But consciousness does not work this way. Being creates having. What you are conscious of being determines what you experience. Your assumption is the cause. Your circumstances are the effect. I told Neville, you must first start with self. Find self. Don't be ashamed of the being you are. Discover it and start the changing of that self. Most people never do this. They never observe the consciousness they are actually living from. They never see that their poverty is not happening to them. It is happening through them. When Neville came to me that day and told me he wanted to go to Barbados but had no money, I said, "You are in Barbados." He must have thought I was mocking him. Here he was, broke, standing on a street in New York, and I'm telling him he's in Barbados. But in consciousness, he could be anywhere. In consciousness, there is no distance. There are no barriers. There is only the state you occupy. The fatal reversal is believing that the outer world creates your inner state, that circumstances determine consciousness. This belief keeps people trapped in poverty, in limitation, in lack for their entire lives. But when you understand that consciousness is the only reality, everything changes. The three-dimensional world is shadow. Your assumption is substance. Money is not the cause of wealth consciousness. Wealth consciousness is the cause of money. Let me tell you something that will challenge everything your reasoning mind believes to be true. The money in your bank account right now is not the cause of anything. It is the effect, the reflection, the shadow of an assumption you have been holding. Your financial circumstances are showing you what you have been conscious of being. They are the outer expression of an inner state. When I told Neville, "You are in Barbados," I was not speaking of his physical body. I was speaking of consciousness, because consciousness is the only reality that matters. Neville later recounted what he did with this teaching. Each night, he would lie in his bed in that single room in New York and imagine he was sleeping in his mother's house in Barbados. He would hear the tropical sounds. He would smell the different atmosphere. He would see New York as 2,000 miles to the northwest. He did not imagine going to Barbados. He imagined being in Barbados. He lived from the end, not toward it. This is crucial. Most people imagine the journey. They imagine getting what they want, but this keeps them in the state of wanting. Neville occupied the state of having. He dwelt in Barbados in consciousness, and consciousness, being the only reality, had no choice but to externalize itself. Within weeks, a letter arrived from his brother Victor. Victor had no conscious knowledge that Neville was assuming he was in Barbados. Victor simply felt an impulse to write. The letter said that the entire family would be gathering in Barbados and Neville was the only one missing. They needed him to complete the link. Victor enclosed a draft for $50 and said he had arranged Neville's passage with the steamship company. You see, consciousness had created the bridge, not Neville's anxious planning, not his desperate schemes, but his assumption in consciousness. This is the principle you must grasp. In consciousness, you can be anything. You can possess anything. You can experience anything. There was a man Neville later taught these same principles. This man believed the entire world was against him because of the accident of his birth. He was a man of African descent in an America that practiced open discrimination. He showed Neville signs as large as buildings denying him access to certain areas. He felt his poverty was caused by others, by society, by circumstances beyond his control. But Neville told him what I had taught him, that there is no power outside the mind of man, that he had consented to these restrictions through his consciousness, that by the arrangement of his own mind, by believing himself set upon, he had to be set upon. That man wrestled with this truth for almost 3 years. 3 years of observing his thoughts, 3 years of changing his assumptions, 3 years of occupying a different state in consciousness. And when Neville saw him again, the transformation was complete. 4 excellent office locations had been offered to him. He chose one on Wilshire Boulevard, and he said, "Neville, this year I will net $250,000. From believing he was condemned to poverty by circumstances to netting $250,000 per year. Not because the world changed, but because his consciousness changed. Here's what most people do not understand. You are not becoming a millionaire. You are not working toward wealth. You are not on a journey to abundance. The millionaire already exists within you right now. The wealthy version of yourself is already complete, already whole, already living in consciousness. Your only task is to assume it, to occupy that state, to live from it rather than toward it. But this requires something most people refuse to do. It requires letting your poor self die. And this terrifies people because they have become so identified with their poor self that letting it die feels like actual death. Your poor self has its own logic, its own beliefs, its own patterns. It knows how to survive in poverty. It finds security in frugality. It feels safe in limitation. Your wealthy self operates on completely different principles. It does not hoard. It flows. It does not worry. It expects. It does not check prices compulsively. It moves with ease and certainty. These two selves cannot coexist. One must die so the other can live. Before Neville traveled to Barbados, I said something cryptic. Instruct him. I said, "When you return from Barbados, you will have died." He did not understand what I meant, But I knew the Neville who wanted to go to Barbados had to die. The Neville who lived in lack had to die. The Neville who believed circumstances controlled him had to die so that a new Neville could emerge. A Neville who knew himself to be consciousness itself. A Neville who understood that he created his world from within. And this is exactly what happened. Neville later told me that when he returned from Barbados, everything had changed within him. Not just his circumstances, but his entire being. The old self had died. The new self had been born. This is what must happen with wealth. Your poor self must die completely, not improved, not educated, but released entirely. And in its place, your wealthy self must be born, not as a future possibility, but as a present reality in consciousness. Now, let me tell you about something most people completely overlook. Your inner conversations about money are creating your bank account right now. Every single day, every single moment, every thought you think about money is a command to consciousness. Every inner conversation is an assumption being made, and your assumptions harden into facts. This is law. I told Neville, find self. Don't be ashamed of the being you are. Discover it and start the changing of that self. Most people never observe their inner speech. They let thoughts run wild, never realizing that each one is forming their financial future. When you look at your bank account with anxiety, you are assuming poverty. When you think, I cannot afford this, you are commanding lack into your experience. When you worry about bills, you are dwelling in the consciousness of limitation. These are not harmless thoughts. These are creative acts. Your inner speech is the womb in which your financial circumstances are being formed right now. The man who nets $250,000 per year does not have anxious conversations with himself about electricity bills, not because he can afford them, but because such thoughts are not part of his consciousness. He does not check prices compulsively, looking for the cheapest option out of fear. He does not feel tightness in his chest when spending money. He does not say, I cannot afford this, even in jest. Why? Because he is wealthy in consciousness, and his inner conversations naturally reflect that wealth. He thinks from abundance, not toward it. You must become aware of your inner speech. What do you say to yourself about money when no one else is listening? What thoughts arise automatically when bills arrive? What feelings move through you when you see your bank balance? These reveal your assumption. These show you the consciousness you are actually occupying, regardless of what you tell others or even what you tell yourself. And until you see them clearly, you cannot change them. You cannot transform what you refuse to acknowledge. But here is what will set you free. That poverty consciousness is not you. It is simply a state you have been occupying, a collection of beliefs you accepted over time, and you can occupy a different state. When Neville changed his inner speech from, I cannot afford to visit Barbados, to I am in Barbados, his world changed. The outer conformed to the inner. His assumption hardened into fact. Your inner conversations about money must become the inner conversations of a wealthy person, not as pretense, but as assumption, as the natural expression of who you know yourself to be in consciousness. Now, I will tell you something that contradicts everything the world teaches about wealth. When you truly assume wealth in consciousness, you cease from anxious effort. The world says you must work harder, hustle more, chase opportunities relentlessly, do whatever it takes. But this is the consciousness of lack trying to overcome itself through force. True wealth consciousness rests, not in laziness, not in passivity, but in certainty, in the knowing that the work is already done in consciousness. In scripture, there is the principle of the Sabbath, the seventh day of rest. Most people think this is about a calendar day, about not working on Saturday or Sunday. But the Sabbath is about consciousness. When you assume your desire is fulfilled in consciousness, the work is done. You rest. You cease from the labor of trying to make it happen through anxious manipulation. Before Neville traveled to Barbados, I said to him, "When you return from Barbados, you will have died." I spoke in cryptic ways because truth must sometimes bypass the reasoning mind. The old Neville, the one who struggled and worried and tried to figure out how to make things happen, had to die. A new Neville, one who understood the Sabbath, had to emerge, and this is exactly what happened. When Neville returned from Barbados, he was transformed. He was no longer a man chasing his desires through anxious effort. He had become a man who understood rest, who understood that assumption does the work. This is the Sabbath. When you rest in your assumption of wealth, opportunities come to you naturally. Ideas arise spontaneously. Paths reveal themselves without strain. Neville did not plan how to get to Barbados. He did not strategize or scheme or manipulate. He simply assumed he was there in consciousness, and then he rested in that assumption. His brother Victor felt compelled to write. The steamship company found a first-class cabin. Every detail arranged itself without Neville's anxious interference. This is how wealth comes. When you understand the Sabbath, not through desperate grasping, not through exhausting hustle, but through restful assumption that allows the law to work unhindered. When you truly know you are wealthy in consciousness, you don't chase money. You rest in the knowing that abundance is yours. And then, mysteriously, money finds its way to you through channels you never planned or expected. People always want to know the how. How will the money come? How will opportunities appear? How will circumstances change? What steps must I take? But the how is not your concern. Your only concern is to assume the end, to occupy the state of wealth in consciousness. The law takes care of the middle. The law creates the bridge. When Neville went to the steamship company after receiving his brother's letter, they told him they could only accommodate him in third class. He could use first class areas during the day for meals and socializing, but he would have to sleep in third class. He came back to me and told me this, and my response was absolute. I said to him, "Who told you you're going third class? You are already in Barbados and you went first class." Then I closed the door on him. I did not console him. I did not help him figure out how to upgrade his ticket. I simply affirmed the law. His assumption determined his experience. Not the ticket agent, not the availability of cabins. His consciousness. On the morning of December 6th, when Neville went to board the ship, the ticket agent said to him, "Mr. Goddard, I have good news for you. We have a cancellation. You can now go first class, though you will share the cabin with two others." This is what I call the bridge of incidents, a series of events arranged by consciousness that leads you naturally and inevitably to your assumed end. Neville's brother Victor had no conscious knowledge that Neville was assuming he was in Barbados. The ticket agent who told Neville about the cancellation did not know. The person who canceled their first class passage did not know. Yet all of these events, all of these people, all of these circumstances aligned perfectly to fulfill Neville's assumption in consciousness. This is how the law works. Your assumption sets forces in motion that you cannot see or control, but they work on your behalf nonetheless. They create the bridge between your inner assumption and your outer experience. The man who went from believing he was condemned to poverty to netting $250,000 per year did not plan every step of his journey. He simply changed his consciousness, and then opportunities presented themselves. People came into his life. 4 excellent office locations were offered to him, all because his consciousness had changed, all because he had assumed a different state. The bridge revealed itself naturally. Your job is not to figure out how you will become wealthy. Your job is to assume you already are wealthy in consciousness. Live from that assumption, dwell in it, rest in it, and watch as the bridge of incidents naturally reveals itself. Doors will open that you did not know existed. People will offer help you never requested. Money will come through channels you never considered or planned. This is not magic. This is law. Consciousness always externalizes itself. Your assumption always hardens into fact. Always. Now, I will tell you the most important truth of all. In consciousness, you are wealthy now, not tomorrow, not next month, not next year, but now, in this very moment. Time is merely the unfolding of what already exists in consciousness. It is the interval between assumption and manifestation. But in consciousness itself, there is no time. There is only the eternal now. When Neville was in his single room in New York with no money, no prospects, no visible path, I told him, "You are in Barbados. Not you will be, but you are." In consciousness, he was already there. The journey had already happened. The fulfillment was already complete. Time was simply the bridge between his inner reality and his outer experience. This is what most people do not understand about manifestation. They think it is about bringing something into existence that does not yet exist. But this is false. Everything already exists in consciousness. The wealthy version of you already exists. The abundant life already exists. It is complete. It is whole. It is done right now. Your assumption determines which version you experience. Time determines when you see it reflected in your outer world. But in consciousness, it already is. When you assume, "I will be wealthy someday," you are commanding poverty now. Because in consciousness, you are not wealthy. You are waiting to be wealthy. And so you experience the state of waiting. But when you assume, "I am wealthy now," even if your senses scream otherwise, you are commanding wealth. You are dwelling in the fulfilled state. You are occupying the consciousness of abundance. This assumption, held with conviction, collapses time. What might take years unfolds in weeks. What seems impossible becomes natural because consciousness is the only reality. Time is just the shadow, the reflection, the unfolding of what consciousness has already created. This is why I told Neville, "You are in Barbados as a present fact, not a future promise." And within 1 month, he was physically in Barbados. The outer conformed to the inner. You must stop living in the future tense. Stop saying, "I will be wealthy when I get this opportunity," or "I will be abundant when circumstances change." Start knowing, "I am wealthy now." Feel it. Assume it. Dwell in it as your present reality in consciousness. This assumption, maintained faithfully, must externalize itself. The law is absolute. What you are conscious of being, you become, not someday, but now. So here's what you must understand. The millionaire assumption is not about visualizing money or repeating affirmations or working harder than everyone else. It is about becoming wealthy in consciousness before the world reflects it. It is about occupying the state of abundance regardless of what your senses report. It is about dwelling in wealth as a present reality, not a future possibility. Consciousness creates circumstances, never the reverse. This is the foundation of everything I taught Neville. Your poverty is not caused by the economy. It is not caused by your upbringing, your lack of education, your absence of opportunities, or any external condition whatsoever. Your poverty is caused by poverty consciousness, by the state you have been occupying, by the assumptions you have been making about yourself and money. And the moment you change your consciousness, your world must change. This is not hope. This is not positive thinking. This is law. I taught Neville this principle in 1933 during the darkest economic period in American history. It transformed his entire understanding of how creation works. He went from being a man who struggled with lack to becoming a teacher who understood consciousness so deeply that he could teach others to transform their lives through assumption alone. Not because he got lucky, not because opportunities magically fell into his lap, but because he learned to assume the end before the world showed him evidence. You can do the same. You must do the same. If you truly want wealth, assume it now, not tomorrow, not when circumstances change, not when you finally figure out the how, but now. In this moment, in consciousness, live as though you are already wealthy, not in reckless spending or foolish action, but in calm certainty, in inner peace about money in natural expectation of abundance. Stop checking your bank account with anxiety, wondering when things will change. Stop saying, I cannot afford this, and reinforcing poverty consciousness. Stop dwelling in conversations of lack and limitation. Instead, occupy wealth consciousness. Feel what the wealthy version of yourself feels. Think what that version thinks. Speak as that version speaks. Move through the world as that version moves. And watch as your outer world rearranges itself to match your inner assumption. Money will come, not because you chased it, but because you became wealthy in consciousness first, and money had no choice but to conform to your assumption. Opportunities will appear, not because you manipulated circumstances, but because consciousness always externalizes itself, always creates the bridge between assumption and manifestation. The path will reveal itself not through your anxious planning, but through the natural outworking of the law. This is the millionaire assumption. This is what I taught Neville that changed everything. And this is what you must learn if you truly want to embody wealth before money arrives. If you want to master this assumption, if you want the exact practices for maintaining wealth consciousness, even when doubt arises, comment reset below. The Manifest Reset contains 5 powerful shifts that will guide you back to abundance consciousness whenever the three-dimensional world tries to pull you into lack. These are principles derived from everything I taught Neville. Comment reset now, and you will receive it. But there is something else I revealed to Neville about wealth. Something so powerful most students never fully grasped it. A hidden principle about wealth consciousness that explains why some people manifest millions while others remain stuck no matter how much they visualize. I reveal this principle in the video appearing on your screen right now. It is called the wealth secret Abdullah revealed to Neville Goddard that most people will never know. Watch it next and you will understand the final piece of the puzzle, the invitation to a new reality. The journey begins not with a step, but with a state. The world you desire is not a distant destination. It is a present condition of consciousness waiting for your assumption. Dare to occupy it and let reality rearrange itself in proof of your inner truth. Subscribe to Stories and Quotes B for more timeless wisdom and transformative principles.